last week we started doing it. We're doing it this week as well. So first thing to quite ask is why? Why do we do it? And to be perfectly honest, when I first heard about mobbing, I heard the idea that a whole team sits at a computer and does all the work together at just one computer. I just thought, well, that's just stupid. But to be fair, that's the same thing that I thought about pair coding when I first heard about pair coding. I thought it was a ridiculous idea.
Well, I was going to say, I missed the original brand map. Can you just define what makes a mob over like just a team working collaboratively?
Yeah, so the idea of mobbing is that you all work on one ticket at a time on one computer. So the quote was something like, all the brilliant minds all in the same place at the same time. So you don't split off into subgroups. You have the whole team sitting at one screen, one computer, working on one piece of code. One.
So the whole team, that includes QAs, BAs?
The way that we've done it, and it seems the way most people do it, is the QAs and the devs are there all the time, product owners and BAs dip in and out. So they're not there all the time, but they're some of the time. And like I say, I just thought it sounded ridiculous, but I have to confess I wasn't keen on pair coding when I first heard about it several years ago. And I went to a talk about it at XP Man, and this guy Joe Lloyd, who came and spoke to us a few weeks ago, described how it worked for their team, and I began to see the point of it. So the question why we did it, well, it was something new and shiny. It was something, new and different. It sounded interesting. And I pushed quite hard for it, that's true. And this talk that I'd seen at XP Man, it was a really good talk. He explained it really well. He made a really good case for it. And he then told us about this guy, Woody Zewell, who some of you may have heard of, who's also involved in the No Estimates movement, who had done it in America and had done a talk about it that was available on the internet. So there was that as well. And what we did was we all got together and we watched that talk. But in terms of what we thought we might get out of it, we thought it might improve the quality of our output. We thought that we might be able to learn lots of things, and it was just exciting and shiny and unicorns and rainbows and all the rest of it. So what were our expectations? What did we think we were going to get? And to be fair, there was quite a mixture. Like, I thought it was going to solve everything. I thought it was going to be amazing, and some people weren't so keen, were a bit worried, were a bit sceptical. There was quite a mix in the team as a whole. We weren't trying to solve a particular problem. We were just, we just wanted to try it out, really. It was just an experiment. So, like I say, we watched the video. I got all the team together in this room. We were actually here for a couple of hours, so it's quite a long video. So we watched the video, and then we discussed it. And in the course of discussing it, I made a proposal. I said, why don't we try it for a week? Some people said, why don't we try it for a day? We thought if we only tried it for a day, we wouldn't get the full experience, because part of the point of mobbing is it's not just about how you approach a particular ticket, it's about how you deal with the whole day-to-day business of being a team. So what we thought was that if we only mobbed for a day, we wouldn't get that experience of being interrupted and having to deal with a live issue, or having a meeting with somebody outside the team, or other things coming into the team that interrupt the daily work. We wanted to see how we could handle that as a mob, as well as just how we could develop a ticket. So we decided we were going to do it. We agreed that we would try it for a full week so that we'd get the full benefit. I managed to persuade everybody. We didn't go ahead until we had everybody's agreement. So in that meeting where we watched the video, we had a big long discussion about it. I proposed that we do it for a week. There was a bit of back and forth, and in the end everybody on the team agreed that it would be an interesting thing to do, to try and do it for a full week. And we made it very clear that we didn't want to force anybody into it, that we needed the whole team to be buying into this. Everybody had to be on board, because otherwise it just wasn't going to work. So we got to a point where we all agreed that a week would be a good idea. So then we had to think about how we were going to set things up. We had to think about where we were going to do it. So originally we actually booked Europe upstairs for a full week. And then as one of our actions, we said we're going to have to make sure that our big screen can get up to Europe, because we were going to have to put it in the lift and take it up, because we've got a giant screen, because you need a giant screen, obviously, because everybody's got to be able to see what's going on. And we discovered just before Christmas that our giant screen doesn't go in the lift. The only way of moving those giant screens is to take them apart And what we were being told is that it takes 5 people to take one of those things apart, because they're very big and heavy and they're bolted together. You can't just adjust them to make them lower. You have to get a big screwdriver and take it apart. And they're really heavy. It's not a simple operation. So we decided against using Europe, which meant that we had to think about what we were going to do. As a sort of urgent, just, oh my God, how are we going to do this? We just sort of cobbled something together. I'll show you a diagram in a bit. In fact, I can go to that now. So this is the end of our bank of desks, hotel distribution. This is normally Arwell's desk. This is normally Simon's desk. We cleared Arwell and Simon off, moved them over there somewhere. So we had 2 empty desks, and we put the screen there, so that at least people sitting here had quite a good view of the screen. People sitting here, not so much. So I'll go back to that in detail later, but that was how we started. So we had to think about location, we had to think about what kind of screen we were going to use and how we were going to attach to it. We had to think about desks, and we had to think about how long we were going to spend doing it, but also how we were going to manage just the daily business of people arriving at work, people leaving. We didn't want to change our working practices. We didn't want to force people to work 9 to 5, because we don't normally work 9 to 5, not all of us, and we didn't want to make it an uncomfortable experience for people. So we agreed that we would carry on working the same flexible hours we've always worked, and just whoever arrives first in the morning, if there's obvious work that they can start working on, then they just start working on it. And as the team arrives, you get more and more people. Same at the end of the day, you get fewer and fewer people. If you reach a point where you don't think you can continue on your own and the only person there, then find other things to do. So, as I said, this was the arrangement we had on our very first day. So, how was the first day? It was noisy, it was chaotic. There was confusion about lunchtime. There was a bit of complaint that people didn't come back after lunch in time, so we were waiting for people to arrive. And we'd already agreed that we would have retros every day. So we had a retro at the end of that first day, and I was feeling a bit disappointed, to be honest. It was straight after Christmas, so I was already a bit kind of January anyway. But I'd expected it to be amazing, and it wasn't amazing. It was a bit uncomfortable, a bit frustrating, a bit confusing. But just on that first day, we did solve a tricky problem. So we had a problem that was to do with some configs that we were scratching our heads over, and because there were four devs, 2 QAs, 6 people with a lot of knowledge, it was really quick to fix that problem. It was the kind of problem that 2 people even could have spent a whole day, disappearing off down rabbit holes. But because there were so many people there who had knowledge, and who could also say, no, don't go in that direction because I know that's not going to work, or or why are you going in that direction, or why don't we try this? And there was enough people there that we could solve a tricky problem very quickly, and we all noticed that. We could all see the benefit of that. I just thought of something that I hadn't said. Oh yeah, something that I haven't mentioned is the way that we work is, and this came from Woody Zewell, it was recommended by him and it makes sense, is that there is obviously only ever one person at the keyboard, so there is only one keyboard here in the middle, and we take it in turns to use that keyboard. Originally we said 20 minutes, now we're doing 15 minutes, so every 15 minutes we rotate. And we've actually got a piece of software that was developed by Woody Zewell's team that actually just seizes control of the computer every 15 minutes and tells you who's next. So it just tells you whose turn it is. So you don't have to think about whose turn it is. It makes sure that everybody has a go. And I think maybe we're not as rigid about it as he was. The way he described it, the person who has the keyboard is not allowed to have the ideas. So the person who has the keyboard is just a cipher. It's just doing what everybody else tells them to do. And the point of that is that if you have the keyboard and you're having the ideas and you're deciding what to do next, then you're just going to start zipping around the screen and everybody else is just going to lose focus. They're not going to follow what's happening. Whereas if you're doing what you're told to do, then everything that you do is being described to the group and is having to be explained to at least one person, the person on the keyboard, which means there's a much better chance that everybody else will follow. So the first day, not great, but like I say, we had retros at the end of the day, and one of the first things we decided that we didn't like this setup. We didn't like it because this screen is really big and we were really close to it, and even when we were sitting here we were getting cricks in our necks. If you were sitting here you just couldn't see what was going on. You couldn't really see that end of the screen because of the angle that you were at. So we had a bit of a think, and we decided that what we could do was use this area here, which you probably all know now that's where we've been for the last week and a half. So just behind that wall where there's a giant funny shaped table. We put the screen there, so these are the windows here, and we all just kind of sat around like that. So that was how we were doing it at the beginning of the second day. So that first week, last week, there were lots of drawbacks. There were lots of things that we didn't like it, lots of problems. So one of the problems that people described was that when they were the person at the keyboard, they felt like, or even when they weren't the person at the keyboard, but they didn't get to have individual influence over what was happening. So they didn't get to explore their own individual ideas. They didn't get to have any kind of real individual agency. That everything kind of became a group hive mind thing, and and therefore you kind of lost a bit of the ability to experiment and explore. Some people felt they were being got at, particularly if they were on the keyboard and people were shouting at them and telling them what to do, and they felt a bit dim, like they weren't following what was going on. Some of the time it was just confusing, didn't know what was happening, particularly if you've gone away for a cup of tea and you've come back again and people have moved on, and you don't want to interrupt the flow, but you're just confused. Very noisy, everybody talking at once, people talking over each other, getting excited, shouting at each other, and physically not comfortable. So the fact that we've got a keyboard like this but a screen like this means that if you're on the keyboard, you're sitting at a really awkward angle, because you need to at least face the keyboard, but you also need to see the screen. So I was getting all sorts of aches and pains, and there's also a bit of a problem when you're sitting up this end that you can't see so well, that you're looking quite a distance, but when you're here you're too close. So that was difficult. So those are the things that weren't so great. I think there's a few more. One of the things we noticed is that it amplified the benefits and the frustrations of pair coding. So a lot of the things that are difficult about pair coding are even more difficult in a mob. It's tiring. It's tiring because it's so busy, because there's so much going on. You feel like you have to concentrate all the time. It's easy to lose track of what's going on. I think I've mentioned the other things. So what are the good things about it? It was moving faster. It wasn't at first. At first, we were disappointed at how slow it was, because one of the ways that Woody Zewell and Joe Lloyd sold it was that they said that they were surprised at how fast they got through the tickets. But it did speed up as the week wore on.
That's what I'm all for.
You really want me to tell you if you want?
Ask Arwell.
It's not something quite said that I would do myself. Thank you very much.
So what that's expressing is that we would just fix things straight away. We wouldn't create tickets for the backlog. We wouldn't say, oh, there's a thing we'll sort out later. We would come across, side issues, things that weren't necessarily directly related to what we were doing, but were important, and we'd say, let's just fix it, let's do it now. There was a lot of that. We learnt a lot because there's so many minds in the room, because there's so many experiences, there's so many different ways of doing things. We all learnt new things, and we all felt like the quality of what we were generating was better. We were asking more questions about what we were doing. We were paying more attention to doing it right. There was nowhere to hide. Everybody was seeing the code. Even as a pair, you can sometimes get a bit complicit and go, oh yeah, let's just do that. But when everybody is looking at it and everybody has got an input, the quality definitely improves. And it's not just that you understand the code you're writing. You know everything the team's working on. Everybody knows everything that's happening. So there's no need for daily stand-ups, because everybody's in the room already. Everybody knows what you're doing. Everybody knows the issues that are coming in. Everybody it understands the complexities of a particular ticket, understands how this piece of work fits in with any other piece of work that you're doing, because everybody's doing all of it. So is there anything in there that I haven't already mentioned? The QAs were much more involved. So they were right there all the time. They were writing the code. Addy would quite often be doing manual testing at the same time as we were doing what we were doing. So we all had our laptops with us as well. So there's one big screen, but we all also had our laptops, so if we wanted to, we could work on other things. So typically, Addy in particular would be doing testing while we were working on things. So yeah, no stand-ups, no planning meeting, no meetings. We were already in a meeting. You know, we didn't need to go away and have meetings, and if anybody else needed to have a meeting with us, they could just come and talk to the mob. And when live issues occurred, we all handled it all at once, straight away. We could all see what was going on. So that's, you know, because quite often what will happen, a live issue will come in and initially, well, Simon will look at it. They'll be looking at Cabana and New Relic, which means that they typically have a lot more experience of Cabana and New Relic than the rest of the team do. So, but in this case, we were all looking at it, all at the same time, all getting an understanding of what was happening. So at the end of the first week, how did we feel last Friday? To be honest, we did a kind of we'd been voting every day, so we've been giving a score out of 10. And the score had actually, the average score had stayed at around about 5. So although individuals had moved around within that, at the end on Friday, the average, it was still something like 5.3 or something.
Yeah, opinions seem to polarise one way or another towards the end of the week.
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
So
So
in the middle, and then they kind of went yes or no.
yeah, so we had a 3 at the end. I think our lowest was a 3 and our highest was an 8, was it? At the end. Did we get a 10? Not on the Friday. We did get a 10 on the first day, but
like 3s and 4s, and then the 7, bunch of 7s.
yeah, yeah. So, you know, but nobody was like leaping up and down and saying this is the most amazing thing we've ever done. There was, you know, a feeling that it's a bit uncomfortable, it's a bit frustrating. It didn't go we didn't get through work as fast as we thought we were going to. But we discussed it, and one of the things that we were all kind of in agreement on was that this was something new. So in the same way as you're not going to do pair coding and pick it up straight away and be really brilliant at it, or even love it straight away, we were aware that we didn't feel like we'd given it enough of a chance, that this was a new skill that we were learning. We maybe weren't very good at it yet, and that we could still improve, and we didn't want to just, you know, reject it. But what we didn't want was for this to happen every Friday, for us to come together and say, well, it's all right, shall we try it again for another week? And I mean, I was a bit worried that, because obviously some people were saying that they were on a 3 out of 10. So we didn't want the 3s to be feeling like they were being coerced into doing it over and over when they were never really quite happy with it. So we came up with some actions for this week. One of the actions was that we said people have permission to walk away. So if somebody's had enough, they can just leave. They can go to their own desk, take the laptop and work individually. That we didn't want anybody to feel coerced into doing this. We agreed to be kind to each other. So, you know, there was this idea that some people were feeling a bit got at, were, you know, feeling a bit insecure. And that was one of the things that Woody Zill said, that they had to explicitly agree to be nice to each other and, like, take account of each other's feelings. We agreed to rearrange the space yet again. So this time, we had the screen that way, which means that everybody's a similar distance away from the screen, everybody's facing the screen, nearly everybody. Sometimes somebody might be sitting there if they're not actively engaged with what we're doing. So it's a simple change. The screen's moved from here to there, but that's what we're doing this week. And we agreed there would be no third week. That, you know, we explicitly said we're not just going to keep saying, oh, maybe another one, maybe another one. You know, there might be a fourth week, but at the end of this week, we're going to stop the experiment for now, and next week we'll be going back to normal. And we also agreed to push to QA frequently. So although we had been pushing to QA and Ad had been testing alongside what we were doing, we thought we could have been doing better at that. We could have been, because there was no merge problems, you know, there was no worry about other members of the team conflicting what we were doing. So we could have pushed more frequently. We could have had Addy, you know, testing things really quickly as we were developing them. So that was the end of last week. So this week we've got this new setup. And we're finding that the momentum's good. The things that we felt like we learned last week. So I mean, to be fair, the end of last week, Thursday and Friday, was definitely better than Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You know, we were picking up momentum. The quality was good. We were already being kinder to each other. We weren't shouting at each other so much. We weren't quite so noisy. And you know, we're kind of feeling surprisingly positive this week. So those that were feeling a bit last week, cheered up this week, feeling better about it. We feel like the quality's good. We feel like if we finish work on a ticket, we're confident it's not going to come back. That we feel like we've done a good job, and we've actually considered every possibility, and there's not going to be a load of bugs coming back at us. There have been some really good group discussions about design, so we had a really interesting discussion just yesterday about how we were going to design just a little feature that we were doing. We had some discussion of solid principles, and that was really nice to be able to just do that ad hoc as a team, have those proper in-depth discussions about things without having to call a meeting. So I think this week's feeling really good. So what's going to happen in the future? One of the problems is that whoever's laptop, because we don't have a team laptop, so the laptop that the work is happening on is somebody's laptop. And if it's your laptop, you can't just go off and check your emails or, just do something else for a bit because your laptop's right there in the middle of the table. Although what we have done is we've swapped them around. So if somebody says, I want my laptop back, then we just swap it for somebody else's laptop. So obviously we can do that. But we really, if we're going to do it again, we need a team laptop, really. And it's still, I'm finding it's still not completely comfortable. The screen's still a bit too high. Still a bit too close to it, but if you move back then you can't quite focus on it properly. It's not a proper desk. I've got my desk all set up nicely how I like it. I've got a footstool, all of those things. I find I start getting a bit uncomfortable after a while. But generally the way we've got the desks at the moment are better than any other setup that we've had, and we do want to do it again. So what we're thinking is that we'll probably use it on an ad hoc basis. We'll use it when we see a big piece of work coming up. Maybe we'll use it if we feel that we all want to discuss something. And I didn't get a chance to share this with the team, but I was talking to Al about it the other day. And he was suggesting that we could have a permanent setup that provides the possibility of instant mobbing. So for instance, something like this, where this is just our ordinary desks, but there is also a giant screen just immediately in front of it, so that if we suddenly decide we want to mob, we're just there. It also means that we're sitting at proper desks while we're doing it, instead of sitting at a slightly uncomfortable table that's not really a desk. So that's a possibility of actually setting up our workspace so that we can just mob at the drop of a hat. And we're kind of thinking, we don't know yet, but we're kind of thinking that might be the way that we end up doing things, that we will mob occasionally when we feel like it's the right time. And I think that's pretty much it. So, questions. I'm going to sit down now because we can all answer questions.
Did you do the same amount of points for your sprint? Did the velocity suffer?
Yes.
How much? Percentage?
We did about 70%, something like that.
How much do you attribute that to more programming and not just because you're learning it?
I think it's largely down to learning. That's my own bias. It's people go slow when they're learning stuff.
How's the rest of the month feel about it?
About what?
Basically what you just said. Do you guys feel the same?
Velocity, is it 70%?
Yeah, absolutely. This week we're probably bang on our average for this time on a Thursday. So it depends how the rest of the afternoon and tomorrow goes. But yeah, we were probably 25 to 30% down last week, but we spent a good portion of time on Monday and Tuesday getting set up, feeling our way through things, getting used to just all working together as one big group. So you start something new, you're going to go slower before you go faster.
How many defects you guys had, if any at all?
0.
0 defects.
No, we had one.
You had one?
We had one on Tuesday where Abby tested something and
Yeah. Yeah, but we just plunged straight back into it. So there was no kind of going away, context switching, coming back, having to remember what it was all about. We pretty much, I think we had started another ticket, had we? Or were we still on that ticket?
Yeah, and then we discovered that base price was wrong.
Yeah, but we went straight back into it, and it wasn't difficult because the gap was so small and there were enough of us that it was easy to remember where we were up to and get back into it.
Because normally that ticket might have sat in the backlog for a week or so, and we wouldn't always get to it.
Yeah. One of the things that we felt like we were noticing was that we weren't creating as many. So I mentioned it before, we would just deal with issues straight away. We wouldn't create another ticket and stick it in the backlog. So when you're measuring points, you have to take that into account, that we weren't creating new points. We were just dealing with things. Although having said that, we did actually, on the back of work that we'd done, we did create a sizable new ticket last week, didn't we?
I think that's more the ticket was wrong. We needed to reload the ticket rather than we found new stuff.
But I guess the stuff that you fixed ad hoc, you probably didn't claim for that as well. That was just you did it and
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you might have actually that 30% you didn't achieve, you probably did elsewhere, but you've not claimed it maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we can split hairs over whether it was equal to, slower than, faster than. I think everyone will probably agree that when you're doing something new, there's a period of slowdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we were behind our normal
So
points total, but
it's,
you know,
it's
I don't
worth
think that's a
noting
bad
that
thing.
we were only putting points to tickets because we wanted to compare. For this year, we've been essentially doing lots of this. So
What's interesting is that mathematically it feels counterintuitive that if you we've got 4 devs, we generally do work in pairs, so normally you've got 2 parallel groups of people working on stuff in parallel. Now we've only got 1 group of people, so you would think that we ought to be only doing half as much work. And one of the things that both Woody Zool and Joe Lloyd said was that they couldn't really explain why, or they kind of could, but they reckoned they were getting more work done as a mob than they were when they were split into smaller groups.
So they recommend, how big or how small the team should be?
I think somebody did say something like 6, so I think that our size, 4 devs, 2 QAs, I think any more than that, it would get difficult.
I agree. If it was more than 4 devs, we quickly get division.
But that's the optimal team size for any team. The people are saying you need to have 5, 6 team sizes. Agile teams, they always suggest you should have a small team.
Why do you, I guess, I would say, do you think it would be impact just because of practicalities of too many people talking, too many people not
Yeah,
being
so
talk,
I think-
or any other one?
I think probably.
But is it just unwieldy when there's 10 people in a
Yeah,
meeting?
so yes, it's unwieldy because the big problem we had in the first week was that we were behaving as if we were pairing, and so but everyone was all the people who weren't at the keyboard were doing, were keeping a constant stream of, do this, and but having 3 people do that at you when you're at a keyboard is hard. But I think it just makes the team more focused as a whole and more predictable, and maybe it averages things out a bit. In that, if the 4 developers were like operating at 100% all the time, that our maximum productivity would be higher if we were working in pairs.
Yeah.
But it feels like because we're all pushed together, that maybe that maximum isn't so high, but there's less variance because there's constant focus and
There's more consistency.
There's more consistency. That's my feeling.
It might not be the highest high peak, but your
but
plateau is higher than the
you're
average.
much more consistent.
Well, Coleman, I heard since this week I've been back, he was saying he was tired doing the mob. And I jokingly, I made a joke there, it's because you actually doing work and not surfing YouTube. But
That's where the mofo comment comes from. Never know what it means. Thanks for that, Dan.
But it's to a certain extent every team is more focused because you may, like you guys said, that you might get I had enough of this, I'm gonna go and watch a boxing video for 5 minutes, I'll be back in a minute. People could do that and leave it and come back to the mob later, but the Alma is a kind of working development, so sometimes you kind of get in a zone and it's easier to do when you're doing yourself. You can sit down on the keyboard and just code for 3 hours without even building, and then you press one button, build, and everything works. And once you come out of that zone, trying to get back into it is really difficult. And I can't quite fathom how it worked for these guys for a whole week of everybody working.
You don't get people disappearing down rabbit holes. There's more people to correct that course, and you don't. There's been no occasion where we've had a problem that we've wasted time or gone down a wrong path or anything.
Well,
The mob
to
has
do
corrected
that mob needs to be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mob
And
kind of
it's
corrects
less
that.
likely to do
Had
that.
you done it before last week, Carwell, or not?
None of us had.
I'd not done it. I wasn't particularly looking forward to it. I started out going, let's try it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will be successful.
Right.
And my
And
trajectory,
opinion
my
changed.
sentiment has gone up since then. And I would work like that 100% of the time if needed to. I think it's a viable way of working.
Manuka's not here because he's ill, sadly. But one of the things he said last week was that he found it really. He was more engaged.
Right.
He thought it was more interesting, maybe because there were several points of view, because there was stuff happening all the time. And another thing that I've noticed is that when you're in a pair, even though there are two of you, and one of the benefits of pairing is that you get an objective view. You can put checks on each other. It's easier to take a step back and look at what you're doing. But one of the things that we said before is that the benefits of pairing, as well as the disadvantages, are amplified in the mob. That you can have two people who are really focused on what's going on, and you can feel comfortable to just take a step back, to actually daydream for a bit, but then also just have a really distant overview, because you're confident that there's at least two people who are really concentrating on what's going on, and you really can take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And there was always at least one person who was doing that at any time, which again puts the brakes on people disappearing down rabbit holes or doing the wrong thing. So even more than in a pair, you get that objectivity.
And did the 15-minute time seem too long, too short? Or
Seems
did it
about
just,
right.
Just
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it seems fine.
20 minutes felt a bit long to
Long
me.
set.
When we went to 15, you just get your turn on the keyboard.
Yeah.
You get 4 devs, you get every hour touch
Yeah.
the keyboard.
Yeah. And another benefit that I didn't explicitly mention that you might have gathered is that people can be sick, people can go to meetings, people can just go and answer their emails or do other things, but the work continues. You don't need everybody to be there all the time. Somebody goes and makes a cup of tea. We hardly ever had group breaks, so the work just keeps rolling.
You said you're all like laptops individually. How was that not a distraction at all? 'Cause I know if I was sat there with a laptop in front of me and there's another screen to look at, every so often I'd probably go on Slack, what's going on there, and lose my focus from what we're actually doing.
Other people can answer for them to say how they found it, but I found that what I would do is most of the time I'd be focusing on the big screen, and I'm hopeless at multitasking. So every now and then I would stop and check my emails, and I would just accept that effectively I was taking a break from the mob at that point. But then I'd look back up and catch up again, and I'd be confident that the things weren't moving so fast that I couldn't work out where we were up to. And yeah, I would have missed a bit, but that's okay, because like I say, other people are focusing on it.
I find that I did that kind of checking stuff when I was happy that my input wasn't needed. I got right, everything's going alright, things rolling, check Slack.
So I guess that'd be fine as long as everyone wasn't doing that, but then you
Yeah.
probably noticed because it's
Yeah.
There were times like that.
That did happen,
When
yeah.
the attention of the mob was drifting, but I was sat at the keyboard and what am I doing next? Come on, what am I doing next? And then that was the shit.
It was actually one of the retroactions, wasn't it, that we said the person at the keyboard, if they feel like the attention isn't being given to what being worked on, call people out on it.
Yeah.
Just put your hand up, shout, tell people to shut up, whatever. And no one's going to get upset about it, because it's natural. Attention will drift, or someone will have a bit of a side conversation that then gets a bit more involved, and other people chip in, and before you know it, you're not focusing on the thing that you were focusing on, but just hand up, stop, let's get back to what we're doing.
I think for me, one of the biggest benefits, I think, for principals and other people who need to mentor everyone is that when effective could indirectly be mentoring the entire team all at once.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it was like that. It was
Because if I was pairing with one person, there are 2 other devs, X number of devs, they're not having the experience of learning how to God knows.
So that happened. We had conversations about we covered my discipline of doing TPD. I kind of engineered a discussion around design and open close principle, and we had that discussion naturally. So you can do kind of mentoring.
You almost arrive at a team standard of what the coach should do.
Yeah.
Because everybody's writing, just like I hate when people do that with if statements and you go,
the first 2 days were full of like, why are you using should in your unit tests?
I was gonna ask
all that
if
kind
they
of stylistic stuff like that.
No,
And
we did kind of our style is similar, is more similar now than I guess across the team than we would be pairing.
Do you think that's like mediating to a norm? Like, in perhaps a higher norm than individually everyone might have achieved, or might regularly achieve, like that, what you were saying before.
It is interesting though, because each individual will have a particular thing that they get really het up about, and actually those peaks do get brought down slightly. So I mean, I can be really anal about formatting, and I had to let go of some of that because it was just getting, I was just constantly telling everybody to reformat everything, and I had to let go of it a bit. And like Arwell said, the wording, the naming of tests, you had to, whatever your own individual thing was, you had to just sort of let go of it. But also it meant that we were all pulling each other up, on quality and things. So I think the overall level was higher, but those peaks have, have had to kind of be levelled out, if that makes sense.
Do you think that it just kind of follow on, I guess having called it out like you did, you were like anal about the formatting. When you go back to your desk next week and actually don't do that, when you go back to your desk and don't do the mock polling, do you think you'll be more aware of it and actually do that less, or do you think you?
I don't know about I probably, probably, because I find that anyway, that I'm influenced by team culture and team style. But I think probably the way that I individually code will have changed slightly. And also I've learnt stuff. I lots of little things, which is always a benefit of pairing anyway. Again, that was amplified, and it's only been a week and a half, but we're all learning things from each other.
Do you think it helps with consistency, especially along like naming?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, clearly.
Do you find did it affect sort of the amount of, sometimes when you sort of experiment your way to a solution kind of thing, did you find it was as easy to kind of try different approaches, or was it kind of too complicated for someone who's got an idea in their head to kind of lay out
that was one of the complaints. That's because Cumran in particular said that he likes to get things wrong on purpose. So he likes to experiment, he likes to deliberately do things wrong. Because if somebody tells him that you shouldn't do it like that, well, he still wants to try doing it so that he can experience it from itself. And what he was saying, and I think a few people agreed, was that in the mob, everybody says, no, don't do it like that, because I know that won't work. So you don't get as an individual to have that experience of seeing it not work. But we did say that actually there's maybe a lesson to be learnt in that sometimes you have to have the confidence to say, okay, so you're telling me it won't work, but can we try it anyway and see it not working? Can we all have that experience together? So again, with pairing, you learn a certain confidence to speak up and to say when you want to try something and say if something's bothering you. I think the same applies to the mob, that you have to learn to say, no, actually, I want to do it this way, and can we just try it, please? So there is that kind of consensus. But I mean, possibly that is one of the reasons why none of us at the moment want to do it, or at least, none of us are chomping at the bit to do it 100% of the time.
On that, would you say there's a certain kind of problem, having done like a week and a half of stuff, would you say there's a certain kind of work you'd be more inclined to go towards it as a solution, or do you feel it kind of works kind of level across the board?
I think really where mobbing works is when you want to get the entire team on the same page and to have the same understanding of something, or to learn collectively. Yeah. So if we were doing something new, I was going to control what we were doing, we'd get the whole team around and get everyone to understand the approach, but also learning stuff about our domain. So I've managed to accrue a bunch of knowledge about our domain, how to deal with live issues, and the mob, that's been spread throughout the mob over the last week and a half, just because I'm not off, on my own on the computer looking at issues.
Which you always have.
Yeah, the entire mob is doing that now. So I think we've learned, as a team, much more about weird bits about the domain.
Is that the same for you said that you were obviously playing different sorts of tickets through the week, but it was a live service issue, so I've kind of written down is this potential kind of concept we can take into when we get actually one, and we're trying to bring a group of people together. Often what I see is people dissipating off into their own corners of the room, trying to there's quite a bit of acclimatisation that's required. So can we just grab a bunch of devs who've not done this before, stick them all on the same screen, and expect them to be able to work together?
I think there are times when it could be helpful, but yeah, I think you've got a point there that it's maybe, you know, it's different teams have different you know, ideas about what they'd like to do, but there's definitely an argument for all the teams at least to have experience of it, so that they can do it at a moment's notice. That thing about what works well in the mob, that's a difficult one, because I think if you've got a giant ticket that's difficult to break down, then obviously that's an obvious candidate for the mob. But also, if you've got lots of little tickets that might be conflicting with each other, that's another good candidate for the mob, because you can just do them one at a time without having to split off. And the other thing, which we haven't resolved this is a question in my mind. If we decide to use mobbing on an ad hoc basis, what we lose is the benefit of always just being there when something comes in, a live issue comes in, not having to context switch, or at least all context switching together. I don't see how you build, if you're doing it on an ad hoc basis, I think you lose that benefit. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is. If we just say that if something really big comes in, we all just drop everything we're doing and we all mob, or what, I don't know. I mean, it's the equivalent of swarming, just with a more conducive physical setup,
so is it
in a way.
If you had a spike coming up, or if you're going to do a particularly tricky SDP, or you're going to undertake a piece of refactoring, you might know next week we've got that on the sort of plan. That might be a candidate for us to Tuesday. We're going to do it, so it's not just like a come out for lunch and find everybody's mobbing.
Yeah.
It's a bit more collaborative.
Yeah. Also, I could see, I mean, who knows what the future holds, but I could see a scenario where we decide to do it on an ad hoc basis, and we just find ourselves doing it more and more frequently on an ad hoc basis until actually it becomes kind of the default, sort of just sort of naturally. I don't know, that might not happen, who knows, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
Sounds like the comfort aspects of the setup were one of the things that's tricky to get right. You obviously change that around quite a bit.
Yeah.
What do you think the optimum thing looks like? So it's obviously important that you're all sharing the same screen, but does that have to be the same physical screen?
Yeah,
could you have your own shared screen in front of each person?
Yeah.
That's been suggested, and we haven't tried it, so we don't know.
Because that might be quite good, sort of ongoing, where you were saying about having a setup that you can switch into that mode, things like that. If alternatively, you essentially kind of screen
Everyone's screen just goes to the same thing.
But only one of them's driving.
You might find it's some more, people aren't as open, because if you're all talking
exactly.
out to people,
Yeah.
everyone's
There
on
is
one
sharing.
screen,
It was
always talking to
Houston, we
themselves.
have a problem.
it was suggested, and we rejected it because it didn't feel as communal. It didn't feel like we'd be properly interacting with each other if we did it like that.
I think there's an add-on for Sublime Text that lets some of that style of stuff, but not mostly no.
Jamie just asked if anybody worked from home. No, but both Woody Zewell and Joe Lloyd said that they found that was one of the benefits. That they had to get a good system. Joe Lloyd said they used WebEx, and they were surprised at that. They tried several different ones, and that was the one they liked the best. So yeah, obviously you need to get decent software set up, but they both said that for instance, if somebody's just got a cold and is full of germs, they're well enough to work, but they don't want to spread their germs to the team, then they can work from home, you know. So we haven't tried that yet, but that should be possible with decent software.
You probably called it mixing in a mob with you.
Let's all work from home tomorrow.
Some good team speak going on.
And just to make up the point, we haven't got our mob station set up right yet. The TV screen is too high. It's on a non-adjustable stand, and regardless of how far back you put it, you can't put it so far back that you can't see the screen. You've got to be a certain distance from it. You do still tend to feel like you're a bit at the front row of the cinema, kind of gazing up at it. So if we were to do it more often, permanently, depends. It needs to either be on an adjustable stand or a more normal monitor height, so that people aren't craning their necks and things like that. We've sorted out the, looking at the screen from side on, and being around a desk that isn't optimal. But I think the screen height is still one of the things that we've mentioned in the retro is still a challenge. But
something I didn't mention, we worked at, when we were on this configuration, where it's that one. I was particularly getting neck-ache when I was on the keyboard, but then I realised that actually there's a laptop here, so I could just look at the laptop. You know, I could sit properly, square onto a desk with a keyboard and a laptop in front of me. Everybody else is looking at this big screen, but I'm looking at the same thing as they're looking at. So apart from when I want to point, that was one thing that we could do. So I mean, maybe one possibility is that if we go for something like this, that we do use some kind of software that means that everybody has the same thing in front of them as well as on a big screen, or something. I don't know. I mean, it's still we haven't got that right yet.
I mean, I kind of like that everyone sits around the desk because it seems better for conversations.
It feels more like a mob rather than 6 individuals all seeing the same thing on a screen.
Yeah.
How to get the team comfortable versus the benefit of certain configurations of promoting discussions.
You know, we're not the experts at this. We're still learning it ourselves. So we've gone through 3 iterations of our mob station setup. We'll probably go through some more before we get the ideal one.
Yeah.
If you're going to try it yourself, expect that you'll probably have to take a bit of time to readjust where you set up, how you set up, where people sit.
I suspect you'll find there isn't a perfect setup, just because there'll always be some drawback to it.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in that kind of setup, everybody can see the screen better, you're all more comfortable, but the communications between the people on the two ends are going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
For example.
One of the big benefits was of doing daily retros was that we could address these issues very quickly, and that felt really good actually. That between us, and I think another thing, when there's only 2 of you, you might put up with things because you might think, oh, it's going to be difficult to fix this. When there's 6 of you, there's enough people to say, no, this needs fixing, let's do something about it. So we responded very quickly. So the fact that we changed setup 3 times in less than a fortnight, and they were, that involved moving quite large things around, but there was enough will, and we were all very clear that that we were allowed to change things, and that feedback was important. That was good.
So were you only picking up tickets that were ready to pick up, and I mean that from that. Did you do any swarming on the analysis, or were you only picking up stuff that?
Yeah, we had quite, that was one of the things I noticed really, the quality of the ticket had to be right. Kind of like, there was a couple of occasions where we had to kind of like have a, quite a big huddle and try and understand what the requirements were a bit more, and that did work. And then as the week went on, we realised that you had to do a lot more upfront analysis, and the ticket had to be in a better state because you've got 6 people.
So the team didn't do the analysis as a team?
Yeah, it'd be a discussion, and then kind of like, we'd go away and find out the answers and quickly get back to the team.
Yeah, so the huddles were really effective because we were all there.
Quick one, practicality, sorry. Could you use a projector? Because then you can move it a lot more. It's a bit old school.
I think that's what Woody Zool does actually.
We did mention the projector, but I don't think the resolution is as good.
Is it not good enough?
No,
Yeah.
I was seeing them set up before.
I was actually going to suggest
Wait a minute,
almost the
everybody's
exact
talking at once.
opposite.
I'll show you the diagram.
Okay, James got a diagram.
I've had, so one of the things that I've seen done is, like, if Callum was at that laptop there, the projector sat next to him, but it's pointing at the wall behind him, so that we're all then talking to Callum
Oh, right.
and looking at the screen,
Oh.
and he's looking at that screen, so it's another way of setting it up. So then it's quite difficult to point at the bit and saying, no, it's that line there.
Yeah,
it's that bit.
yeah, you can use a mouse though.
I was just going to ask how it normally works. So do you normally pair on all tickets?
Not all tickets.
And will that pair always, if you were pairing, would they always stick together until the end of that ticket, or would you rotate?
We normally we pair on most tickets, not all tickets, and we normally stay in the same pair until the end of the ticket. But obviously, sometimes that's not possible. So sometimes it gets chopped and changed in the middle because somebody's ill or whatever. But normally we keep a pair consistent for the life of a ticket.
Don't rotate pairs. That's generally another way of sharing knowledge. Is that make sure you rotate often and you on the same ticket.
But the composition of the pairs changes, so we have no particular preference for any particular pair, so it rotates in that sense.
Do you always make sure you use someone different, or is it always particular?
Just kind of happens, and what tends to happen is if we notice that 2 people have worked on 2 tickets in a row, then the next one will go, well, I've already worked with you on the last 2 tickets, so I want to work with somebody else this time.
Just to see context of doing this from how you normally do it.
Yeah.
You might have found that this worked really well because you were doing pairing really bad with it. No, so it did concentrate
we it probably helps that we are already a cohesive team. We get on with each other. You know, I mean, like Arwell said last week at some point, he said, well, I'm finding that I'm spending all day every day with a bunch of people that I really like. So, you know, that's a positive thing. But
So who here would do that?
yeah, who here would, just as individuals, who'd like to give it a go? It's hard to get teams to vote in this contest.
Can't imagine PTJ signing up on it.
I tried it out because I was quite sceptical about it, so that's why I wanted to come to this and learn.
Yeah.
I was sceptical about it. I didn't think it would work. I was wrong.
We did do it, didn't we, briefly for one session?
Really briefly.
Yeah, and I think what we've learned from this is you really have to throw yourself into it.
I think you do.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
can't just
plan
give
it
it a go.
Yeah, I don't think it works. I don't think you see the benefits unless you do more than one ticket and unless you have a whole day or, you know, a whole week really.
Yeah,
So
so
that you
it's
get
2
all
days,
the
it's like,
different experiences.
Yeah, it's not really until day 4, I think, that we started to feel like we were getting comfortable with it, and that was still comfortable, you know, in a small way, not you know, right, we've cracked this, we're ace at mob programming now. It's just like, okay, we're starting to feel like there's momentum here, so you're doing it for a session or doing it for a day, or you're going to get all the pain and none of the benefit.
But once you're interested to see then, you said you do it ad hoc, do you always have that same pain at the start?
Yeah, we'll find out.
Because otherwise
Can't wait to see
pretty
the next one.
negates the fact.
I think some of the pain
maybe.
was set up, as in finding a comfortable place to be sitting and adjusting to the way of working so that the noise wasn't too bad for people sitting near us. So I can see that if we did it ad hoc, it may be a little less productive, or we get a little less momentum from it, but I don't think we'd have to go through the same initial setup. We'd need to get a mobbing station set up that we could use.
If you want to do it, if the benefits outweigh the disadvantages or the problems, isn't it? If it's like you were saying, that we would be looking at type of a ticket that's more beneficial to doing a mob on a, even if it's one day.
The thing is, it's quite good for just knocking through a bunch of boring stuff as well.
Yeah. But then again, if the analogy stands with pairing, you know, when you first do pairing, for most people it's a bit difficult, it's a bit painful, and you get used to it, and then you can use it on an ad hoc basis, and every time you go back to a pair, you don't suffer the same pain that you did the first time you did it.
I suspect the main pain will be the difference in that kind of knowledge of what's happened since the last mob, effectively, would be the main loss you'd have.
Yeah, so you wouldn't all be starting from exactly the same page every time you jumped into it, because you would have all split off in the meantime, and some people would have learnt some things and other people would have learnt other things. The benefit of doing it all the time is that everybody always knows everything that's happening.
Do you think there's potential for if other teams want to try it, they might be able to jumpstart by having, say, on their first day, they have someone who's been in a mob previously to kind of help
sort of mentor them.
Yeah, mentoring, and maybe you can sort of shave it from a 4-day kind of ramp up to maybe 3 or 2, you know, and just kind of ease in with some of the learning, because obviously that's what you've been trying to present to us, the learnings, but obviously if it's like in situ, kind of when something arises, you can sort of say, well,
Mob
this worked for us before.
Consultants. I suspect that. I suspect that would also be beneficial from the business's point of view, because then you've got, say, if Arwell comes into your team, he then learns more about what you guys do. For example.
I did. I dropped in a couple of times.
Yeah, well,
threw some damn bombs.
Yeah.
You're
and
fine.
then ran away. It's 1:30, so we should probably continue this informally. But thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully it was interesting and informative.
Thank you.
Yeah.